Chopping Spree is a 2021 horror novella by Angela Sylvaine, listed as part of the Rewind or Die collection. In 2024, it was re released, this time as a young adult horror novella. For the purposes of this review, I feel I should mention that I'm reading this as an ARC, which is an advanced reader copy, of the young adult re release of this book. I'm unclear on whether or not the original might have contained different material or content, like more graphic violence or explicit language or sex or anything like that, but this is what I'm reading. Incidentally, this is actually the second book in the Rewind or Died series that I've read. Cirque Berserk was the first, and my memory of it is a little bit foggy now. The details are a bit sketchy for me, but I do remember that I hated it and thought it was horribly written. Oh, no, wait, I actually do remember now. They spent so long expanding on the super sad backstories of the killers that I didn't give a fuck about, and then had them go around killing one-dimensional cardboard cutout characters in the most boring ways imaginable. Well, it's two different authors. Rewind or Die features different authors for every entry, so I don't think I can really judge this one based on that one, so let's get to the recap. People, particularly teenagers, are disappearing in Eden Hills, Minnesota. 16-year-old Penny is going to work at a 1980s-inspired mall that's owned by her father, who wants her to toughen up and stop being so sensitive. She works at a clothing store and stays late with her friends and coworkers for a little drinky drink. A man in a wolf mask comes through and starts murdering people. While trying to escape him, Penny's friends reveal that they are part of a cult centered around Plutus, the god of wealth. It's eventually revealed that the cult is the one kidnapping and killing all of the missing people in Eden Hills, and the wolf killer is the father of one of the missing teenagers. He wants to destroy the mall and bring an end to the killings. Penny eventually helps him thwart the cult and ends up being the lone survivor. Wow, Jenny, I hear you say, is that all? Basically, yeah, it's only 130 pages total or so. And I'm glad because I kind of hated it. You may think to yourself, oh, so the cult worships wealth. That seems like a decently villainous motivation. And yeah, it is. People do horrible things for money all the time. I don't object to the idea of greed being a motivator for a villain. What I take issue with is that this book turned into the most unsubtle screed about the evils of capitalism that I think I've ever seen. And I've seen some, trust me. There's a difference between decrying the veneration of money and the accumulation of wealth at all costs and saying, fuck capitalism. One is a timeless message that has been repeated throughout history in so many different works of art, and the other is a very specific socio-political message. I'm not denying the author her right to put that message in her book if she wants to, but I don't have to like it, especially since she did it in the most ham-fisted way possible. This book's message was like a Looney Tune character bashing me over the head with a hammer. It's Capitalism Bad, the novella. One tiny drop of subtlety present in this book is that shopping malls, for those unaware, were considered centers of gross consumerism in their heyday. Ergo, the mall itself is an extension of capitalism. Now that's called TikTok. Penny's best friend, I don't remember her name and I'm not re-downloading the ARC to look it up, and her family were experiencing major issues as a result of living in poverty until they joined the cult, which lifted them out of poverty at the price of sacrificing innocent people. The author straightforwardly admits in a note at the end of the book that this story and scenario is meant to be reflective of the price that capitalism extracts from us all. So what I'm getting at is, what exactly is the message you're going for here? There are two ways to read this story. Literally, taking all events at face value, and metaphorically, taking the characters and events to be symbolic of something else. Reading this story as being 100% literal, yes, obviously agreeing to literally murdering innocent people so you can get out of poverty is inexcusable. Penny's best friend and her family are the assholes here, no question, no doubt, period, end of story. But as for symbolism, which this book is objectively full of, what are you saying? Is the message here that a family of a lower socioeconomic class managing to claw their way up by owning a successful small business is now guilty of exploitation on the same level as a corporation? Are you saying that by owning a successful small business, a family is now part of a cult of consumerism or the cult of capitalism? If Penny's friend's family wasn't part of the cult, if they were just maybe turning a blind eye to it because it allowed their store and family to flourish, I would get it. You don't approve of the cult, but guiltily benefit from the association, which one could say parallels to small or smaller businesses that ally with shady corporations or just larger businesses so they can advance their personal interests. This metaphor would work because it reflects a reality of capitalism while also giving shades to the actual character's motivations and morality. But having Penny's friend's family be actively involved in the cult as symbolism reads to me like small businesses, including those literally responsible for keeping a family fed and clothed and, with a roof over their heads, have blood on their hands just like corporations. I don't think that's what the author intended, but that's kind of how it comes across to me. I'm torn between whether or not this being a novella works in its favor or not. On one hand, it doesn't have enough time to be subtle. On the other, it means I don't have to spend more time listening to unsubtle sociopolitical preaching. I honestly wonder if that's why the book was re-released as a young adult novella. YA is not a genre known for its subtlety, and assuming no scenes or details were cut from the version I read, none of the content in this book is so graphic that it would be unsuitable for teens. It wasn't just the capitalism stuff that was in your face either. The author really tips us some winks to let us know that Penny's friend is acting suspiciously, and that she's wearing a necklace with a weird symbol on it. Sincerely, I knew the second she mentioned the symbol on the necklace that there would be a cult involved here. My initial theory was that Penny's best friend would be the serial killer and that all of the friend group would end up axed, and I was a quarter right, I guess you'd say? Aside from the whack you in the face levels of messaging, the storytelling was just not great. The pacing was rough. It does not take long for things to kick off, but once they do, things move so quickly that there is no time for any tension to build up. Penny as a main character is pretty forgettable. She's a good girl with a dead mom who wants a better relationship with her father. That's about it. We don't get much time with her to learn any other notable parts of her personality. She tells us that she's too sensitive and not self-reliant enough, according to her father anyways, but we don't really see those traits play out well on the page. Although, admittedly, once we get to the end and she's the only one unwilling to kill people for the sake of the cult, you could argue that that is her being too sensitive, but in a way that is validated by the narrative. Because obviously, saying that you're too sensitive to murder somebody for the sake of the god of wealth is not something any sane person would say. In keeping with how rushed things were, the horror was just not really there at all. A major part of horror is tension, a sense of danger and dread. But we just whip through the plot so fast that nothing has time to cook, and especially with the capitalism stuff getting shoved down your throats in the second half of the book, it goes from a 3 out of 10 to a 0 out of 10 on the scare scale. Which is really disappointing because 80s and 90s themed horror is very popular right now, and the premise of the novella is really good. It's set in a modern day 1980s themed mall, and it's barely used despite being ripe with possibility. The author had an amazing setting that she really could have leaned into and didn't. So, yeah, not a huge fan of this one. I've read better slashers and better homages to the 1980s and 1990s horror that I talked about, and I don't think I'll be hanging around for the author's next work.